Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
Stop him. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any arm.
Welcome to another episode of Eradicating Programmed Ignorance, the Town Crier. Today, the topic that I'm going to bring to your attention is, as I explained last week, just before we ended the show, will be a intensely political discussion. We're going to leave the health issues aside unless you consider we're discussing the health of a constitutional republic, or so we've been told. Today, the information that we're going to be discussing comes from an article that I wrote called The Progressive Bastardization of Modern American Presidential Integrity. Yeah, there's a mouthful for you. Let me repeat that for everybody who didn't get it. The progressive bastardization of modern American presidential integrity. Now, I wrote, I guess what you could say is the origins of this article right at the end of Baby Bush's second term. And then, after our next president, well, guess what? I had to update it. And if you stop to consider after the next president, okay, well, we're not doing too good. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Okay, let's start this out in almost the same fashion we started out every other town crier that we've done. Excuse me. And you know, I always start by coughing, and I can't understand it because we get about 2 or 3 minutes in and that all goes away. So I don't know. We'll see. Must be psychological. I live in America, so it doesn't surprise me. Okay, I have been on this earth for over 3 generations. This is what I was referring to. Or for 15 presidential election cycles. Okay, while I was not aware of politics or the need to be involved for most of my first 20 years, I was at least aware on some level of any issues or scandals associated with the candidates or the sitting presidents. Earlier in my life, if a candidate was embroiled in any controversy, it was huge news splashed across radio, television, and print media with gusto. The press were like wolves attracted to the scent of blood or the blood of a wounded animal. And a feeding frenzy usually ensued. Every candidate or sitting president, be it a Democrat or a Republican, conservative or a liberal, was held accountable for even the slightest hiccup in their lives, to their dismay and to the benefit of we the people. The press was doing their job as the fourth branch intended to hold our representatives and our leaders, our representative leaders, accountable and keep them honest. Or at least they made serious and honest attempts to, because we all know the inroads of the power structure or the elitist caste into the mainstream media is well over 50 years old. And we can hearken back to well before Eisenhower and show incidents of. But we're talking about total control. And this, we're looking at, again, mid-20th century. So something has changed drastically as we approach the 21st century. Now, I won't say that controversy didn't exist in campaigns or with sitting presidents prior to our approach to the century mark. Nixon's name immediately comes to mind. But those occurrences were far rarer in comparison and got much more attention than the recent fiascos we have witnessed in growing abundance and severity, and almost on a daily or weekly basis. One scandal right after another, right after another. And it's gotten to the point where, you know how you hide a scandal? Is you have another one. And you distract attention from the last one. Okay, you choreograph this and you walk it right along. Do you think I'm kidding? It's either that or Democrats have turned into the biggest idiots ever born in this country. Get them away from the vaccines, the GMOs, the geoengineering, the pharma drugs, and the fluoride, because it's obviously taking a serious toll. Okay. So, again, I'm not saying there wasn't controversy before. What I'm saying is that is a matchstick as compared to a bonfire on what we're seeing today. Okay, so what I'm about to present are merely some highlights or some bullet points. So don't think I'm giving you the do-all, end-all. There's no way in hell we can do that with even one of these individuals and do it in an hour or 10 hours or probably 100 hours. So we're going to give you some highlights, some memory jogs. Just remember, this in no way represents a complete telling in any fashion. Yes, I've said that twice, and if I could fit it in there a third time, I probably would. So we're going to harken back to the title. Then we're going to get into these individuals. The title again, The Progressive Bastardization of Modern American Presidential Integrity. Okay. The first one, and I stated as we approached the 21st century. The first one is Bill Clinton. Starting with the election of Bill Clinton in 1992, the Clinton years were rife with one scandal after another. From accusations of heinous corruption during his reign as Arkansas's governor, to the many controversies and scandals that popped up on a regular basis while occupying the White House. These scandals include sexual misconduct, Travelgate, the suicide of Vince Foster, Whitewater, the Rose Law Firm, pay to play, selling the Lincoln bedroom, there's a good one for you, a growing body count in his wake, and so many more. I would be hard-pressed to mention them all, as I stated. So in an attempt to keep this commentary under, I don't know, hours or weeks or months, I will leave it to you to research the tons of available relevant material online. Plug in Bill Clinton scandals. End of story. You've got reading for a year. All this set the stage for the absolute and final destruction of the perceived lily-white reputation of presidential politics going forward. Wasn't quite that lily-white, but you're getting the point. And regardless of what your memories are, or maybe, of this puppet and purveyor of graft, corruption, and destruction, this is not the most shining example of presidential integrity our history has to offer by a huge margin. All right, so we started all this off by stating as we approached the 21st century. So this takes us to the 21st century and our next person in my crosshairs, which is Baby Bush, George W. Bush. Next, we progress to the second round of the Bush dynasty in America, starting in the year 2000. To this day, many say G.W. Bush Jr. and his elitist puppet masters, including Daddy Bush, stole the election in 2000, of which I'm one who happens to think so. How many still remember hanging chads? Some of you may be too young to remember hanging chads, but that combination of words didn't freaking exist until this. So do a little research, do a Bing or a Google search on, hanging chads. Yes, I'm not joking. And the massive controversy surrounding GW's entry into the White House. And so many of us today will never forget that Baby Bush presided over the biggest false flag incident in this country's history. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it ranks right up there with Pearl Harbor. But would I say it is not at least tied for first place? No, I wouldn't say that, because it is. And we'll go over Pearl Harbor someday, and I'll explain to you how that was not a surprise. Was never a surprise. It was an intentional way to bring the United States into a war at the forfeiture of almost 2,600 lives. Amen. This was the day America was thrown under the bus, 9/11, by a cast of elites who used almost 3,000 American lives. And if you take the deaths from the toxins, so on and so forth, and the firefighters, it's well over 3,000. Okay? And they used this to initiate the War on Terror, a plan to bring American imperialism, mass death, and destruction. And every time I say that, I get pushed back by some idiot who never bothers to do any research. Again, I don't challenge you to prove me wrong. I dare you to prove me wrong. If you consider all the deaths in the Middle East, and you consider not only the deaths by violent death, but the deaths by, I don't know, radiation from, depleted uranium ammunition, which is scattered all over the Middle East in concentration and in areas where there are a hell of a lot of people. That's the gift that keeps on giving. Okay, it is estimated that the United States is directly or indirectly responsible for between 3 and 5 million deaths in the Middle East. Okay. This is the War on Terror. Okay, the War on Terror, that as soon as it was initiated and we took down the first couple of countries like, I don't know, Iraq and Afghanistan, the first thing that happened was a new central bank was installed in those countries. Because prior to this happening, plans had been made to attack the Middle East and take down, to attack 7 countries, of which 5 were in the Middle East, okay, and take them down. This was a plan. What we're looking at here is a huge false flag, of which the intent was set down and planned, literally planned, all right, prior to GW ever getting into office. And once he got into office, all they needed was a catalyst. What was the catalyst? It was 9/11. What happened after 9/11? Exactly what you will find in that report that this 4-star general was talking about. Okay, so, and we will finish up his introduction or support of freedom and rights and robbing legislation such as, let's remember the Patriot Act. Let's remember executive orders disguised as mechanisms for we the people's protection and the security of America. Let's remember things like this. And the next person who tells me that the Patriot Act is rightfully named, I will do physical violence on him if he is in front of me, or her. Doesn't matter. Okay? That is the most insane thing anybody can say, and shows their pure ignorance. It shows all they have done is listen to the programmed message. They don't have a clue what the Patriot Act is for, or what it gives the government power to do. And we're not going to go through that on this show. This is about the presidents who literally tore down the integrity of the presidential office. Again, this is light years from being the most shining example of presidential integrity, and in fact, quite the contrary. Let's end his little reign up by stating this. He is, and a lot of his staff, his senior staff, are wanted for crimes against humanity and war crimes in several countries across this planet. These people are not at liberty to fly anywhere they wish, whenever they wish, and they must plan their outside the United States excursions with care. This is presidential integrity. This is a president who is wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. All right. And if anybody out there believes anything about 9/11 at all, anything, if you honestly believe that any of this could have been carried out without GW and his top officials being aware of it, then you're watching the wrong show. So there goes Baby Bush. Everybody knows, okay, what I think about liberals. I'm not their biggest fan. Everybody knows what I think about Obama, and he's next. Now we advance to the last occupier of the Oval Office, meaning having served a full term. President Barack Hussein Obama. Elected in 2008, the closest thing to a self-proclaimed dictator in modern American history. This man's reign, yeah, that is about the most descriptive and accurate term I could use, is fraught with controversy, including, but not limited to, is he actually qualified via the Constitution to sit in the Oval Office? Was he actually born in America? Is he a closet communist due to the massive influence of his parents and his mentors, his self-described mentors? Is he a secretly practicing Muslim? Is he a homosexual? I'm not accusing him of any of this, but there are a lot of people out there who do and show some pretty good proof on all counts. And this is merely the tip of the proverbial and controversial iceberg. Yeah, this guy is coming in with integrity pouring out of every orifice in his body, isn't he? Picking up right where Baby Bush left off, his tenure is responsible for more freedom and rights-robbing legislation and executive orders than all of the other modern-era presidents combined. That's a guess on my part. If somebody can prove me wrong on that, I really would like to be, because it would give me a more accurate answer. I'm going by everything I've done, all the articles I've written, so on and so forth. And although it might not be too comfortable to say that, it's got to be a pretty close call. All right. So this is acts that include reconfirming and strengthening the provisions of the Patriot Act, the passing of the NDAA rider, which allows the indefinite detention of Americans without due process. Hold on, let's just stop on that for 1 second, okay? The indefinite detention of Americans without due process. Are you freaking kidding me? This means they can bust your door down. They can take you away, throw you in a cell, and you never ever get your day in court. How constitutional is that? Because I know a few scholars that screamed bloody murder, and for some reason, nobody was listening. Yeah. Okay. So, indefinite detention of Americans without due process. Also, responsible for the arming of federal civilian agencies such as DHS, NASA, the IRS, etc. Yes, bought weapons and ammunition sufficient to arm these agencies. Okay, and this was for use against Americans. Who else? Give me a break. This isn't Border Patrol. This is middle of the country stuff. And if you're arming them, you're only arming them against one possible, contingent, one possible enemy, ways of evil. Yeah. And the federalization and massive militarization of local police forces. He was also, or had also given himself and his designated representatives the power to assassinate Americans without due process. Okay, stop for a second on this one. You remember how pissed I sounded when I said they could take you and lock you away in prison for the rest of your life and you never got your day in court? How's about they just come up behind you and pop a cap into the back of your frickin' head? You're dead. Is this America? How constitutional is that? This is a sitting American president, okay? And even if he didn't write the damn laws, and he sure as the hell didn't even put up a itty bitty little bit of fuss signing them. Okay, so as we continue, okay, he is like, when you give yourself the ability to pop a cap in someone's head without due process, and all of these other things I discussed, the ability to throw you in prison, the fact that people aren't even aware, and he paid Some say 30 million. I figure it's about 7 or 8 million to hide records so we couldn't even find out any of the questions that need to be answered. Doesn't that throw up red flags? Doesn't it? So how dare anybody balk when I call this guy a self-proclaimed dictator? Because he got away with more than any president I have known of, and I've been around for 15 of them, and he did it with absolute impunity. Okay. All right. Now add to this Obamacare, which is easily the biggest middle-class wrecking piece of legislation ever passed in history, instituted via massive lies, which everybody knew were lies, including Congress, and the coercion of Congress, not hard to do nowadays, a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, against the will of the people. We must also consider in this light his oversight of the destruction of the American industrial base via his staunch support of trade agreements such as TPP and TPP-IP. All of this leading to the biggest decline in American productivity by the very destruction of our once world-beating manufacturing base and the biggest rise in unemployment since the Great Depression. Anybody think that depressions and recessions are things that happen naturally via the cycle of money being passed across the planet? Raise your hand. I want to count how many frickin' idiots are watching. It has nothing to do with it. It is choreographed. Every single depression makes somebody money. Every single recession makes somebody money. Every single expansion makes somebody money. Every single contraction makes somebody money. Are you listening to me? And when it doesn't make somebody money, you and I are left with $1 trillion in bailouts for banks that screwed it up. What happens if you screw up? Can you go to the government and say, I bought a house for $300,000. It's only worth $50,000. It caved in last night. Can you give me some help? What's going to happen to you? But these people blow tens of billions, hundreds of billions of our money, because what money is in their banks? It's ours. Okay? And what happens? They get a bailout. They get a bailout. So, the so-called Democrat is also directly responsible for the huge increase of conflicts the U.S. is involved in on a global scale. Yet, he was simultaneously decimating our military by firing or forcing into retirement almost 300 command-level officers because they did not agree with his insane foreign policy, even though they would and did follow his orders. Or, listen up, here it comes again, or because of their refusal to fire on American citizens if ordered to do so. This was one of Obama's litmus tests for senior officers. Do a Google search on that, or a Bing search. Google might not show it to you. Or better yet, go to the Liberty Beacon and put it in the keyword, as a keyword in the search bar. Okay? And again, this is by no means everything. Once again, certainly not a shining example of presidential integrity in any stretch of the imagination. Okay, are you seeing a trend developing here? Again, there's so much more I could mention. I just don't have time. I don't. What you should be seeing clearly by now is a government with an agenda that is contrary to the benefit and the will of the people. As we walk up through the administration since the early 1990s and the Clinton presidency, the incidences of corruption, complicity, and actions contrary to the continued health and strength of this nation become more numerous and blatant. Yes, fact. Today, it should be readily apparent that this government, whether it be Congress, the executive branch, or even the Supreme Court, no longer serve our interests, but instead serve the interests of their owners and puppet masters, the elite caste, the 1%. I don't give a damn what you want to call them. The life wreckers, the planet wreckers, the Illuminati, Call them what the hell you wish. But they're real. But the entity most in the spotlight, the one we give a celebrity status to and observe the most, is and has always been our president. And our president has been welcomed and lauded across the planet for as long as I remembered, until we approached the 21st century. I have attempted to use this as a gauge to show an accelerating trend in tyranny. But it doesn't end there. I started this all off, excuse me, with the role of the press or media as the fourth branch, whose purpose is to hold our leaders accountable. In doing so, keep them honest in their duty to represent the American people, you and me, we the people. Today, that is the biggest line of bullcrap in existence. We're talking about an entity owned by the very same elitist caste that owns these politicians, these presidential candidates, and sitting presidents. This so-called fourth branch has transformed over basically the same amount of time, or the same time frame, from a champion of the rights and freedoms of the people into an agent or tool of those destroying our birthright for the monetary and power gains of their masters. No, that's not bullcrap. That's a fact. And if you don't want to be hearing the truth, go away. What we need to understand is what's going on this planet today, because it's a whole lot worse than you care to believe, and they spend a whole lot of money and time keeping it behind the curtain. And Toto, the Liberty Beacon, is pulling the freaking curtain back. As is clearly shown, the corruption, tyranny, and in some cases the treasonous actions of the presidents discussed has accelerated in the present time frame. Only to be more sanctioned or heralded as necessary, believe it or not, by said media parroting their masters' talking points. Corruption or tyranny is now hidden, covered over by misdirection or redirection by the very same entity we used to rely on for the honesty and integrity in reporting that we thought we were getting. It is only through the advent of independent or alternative media such as the Liberty Beacon Project and so many other fine platforms out there, made possible by the internet, that we even have a clue of what is transpiring in America today. Imagine if there was no internet. Actually, I don't think you want to. Today, the mainstream media must truly be considered the Judas to we the people. Let me repeat that, because I meant what I said. Today, the mainstream media must truly be considered the Judas to we the people. May they forever choke on their 30 pieces of silver. So let's get on to the final chapters in this saga of corruption, complicity, tyranny, and treason. Now, we're not strictly talking about sitting presidents here. What we're talking about is the actual decimation of the integrity of the office of president, whether it be in U.S. eyes, global eyes. This has happened, and I can think of nobody else who has done more to hurt the integrity of the president of the office of president of the United States than Hillary Rodham Clinton. So let's go that way just for a couple of seconds, okay? As I have more than adequately shown, excuse me, with the other passages that I've already been through, the level of treachery perpetrated on the American people has accelerated until we now live in a country where we no longer trust our leadership to represent us. And the crescendo was the possible, and even, as a lot of people said, the probable election of Hillary Rodham Clinton in 2016. Let me start off by stating I have no love lost for Donald Trump or his colorful history of failures and scandals, or the fact that the Rothschilds bailed him out one time. None of that is for mention here, and you'll find out why. but he is an extremely minor player in the scenario of lying, deceit, greed, and complicity. Hillary is the unchallenged queen of tyranny, far surpassing all of those already stated in this commentary. All of those. Whether we are talking about the controversy attached to her, rightfully so, via her dealings in Arkansas, or due to her convoluted role in her husband's 8 years as president, or the scandals, corruption, and tyranny perpetrated by her during her time as New York Senator or Secretary of State, what we are presented with is the absolute purveyor of heinous controversy, Miss Hillary Rodham Clinton. We could talk about the Hillary or the Clinton body count. We could talk about Whitewater. We could talk about Vince Foster. We could talk about Travelgate. We could talk about Rose Law Firm. We could talk about stealing priceless heirlooms from the White House. We could talk about pay for play. We could talk about Benghazi. We could talk about the Clinton Foundation. We could talk about Haiti. Her illegal and unsecured email server. Benghazi! I said that twice on purpose. Major breaches of national security, hiding your health records, and so much more. The fact is, all this is known, and most of this has been a matter of public record for decades or longer. Here it comes. Yet, this is a woman who ran for president with the almost absolute backing of said mainstream media. Really? I mean, really? That wasn't the media that was around when I grew up. Any one of these scandals would have led to the utter ruination or destruction of a candidate back when the press was truly the fourth branch. But today, it was all overlooked, misrepresented, or blatantly swept under the rug. Try and explain that to me, if you possibly can. If there's anybody out there that thinks they're smart enough to convince me that everything that was done was right and above board, please try. Because we're all going to get a big old bag of popcorn and sit back and get our chuckles. Tainted Hillary could never have been a shining example of presidential integrity. And the world is laughing at us that she was even allowed to run for president of the United States. It's a global joke. But I digress. All right. And finally, we end up with our current president, Mr. Donald Trump. Okay. Trump is not an angel with a pure soul and all good intentions. Because if he did, in fact, not belong to the same club or a chapter of that same club as those mentioned earlier in this commentary, he would never have gotten elected president in America. And that's a fact. So he is not some innocent puppy do-gooder. Yet, he is continuously and constantly lied about, persecuted, demonized, excoriated, backstabbed, etc., etc., etc. Trump is actually, catch this, because I'm saying it, okay? I'm saying it, which is tough. He is actually attempting to accomplish his, and in many cases our goals, in the midst of an ongoing and quite public coup attempt. Again, fact. It's a coup attempt. And actually, he's accomplishing more than most of these other presidents while under an active coup and with Congress stabbing him in the back every time he opens his eyes. Holy crap. Now let's figure out, okay? Trump hasn't been around long enough yet, okay? The chapter covering Trump's contributions to the failing perception of American presidential integrity has not been written yet, or at least not in total. He hasn't even finished his first term. But it will surely contain a chapter on the destruction of presidential integrity via the deep state of the shadow government. What do you think the rest of the country thinks when they look at the rebellious faction or the treasonous faction in Congress and within the deep state, even in the executive branch, that are seriously mistreating this sitting president. What do you think it does for his integrity? What do you think it does for his integrity when he sits down with a foreign leader and the first thing that foreign leader says to him is, they're going to let you back into your country? Yeah, they're all laughing about you today. Stop and think about what's going on here. Please stop and think about what's going on here. If you don't think that the Democrats and Hillary, who is in the South doing her presidential stomping, and yeah, all of a sudden she speaks with a Southern accent again. Okay. If you don't think that all of this put together, all right, hasn't seriously bastardized the integrity of the American office of president, you're an idiot. Because it has. Anyway, next week, I think we're going to go back onto the health issues because there's a couple of things that have happened recently that I would like to present to you. Also, we're going to be talking about cannabis. We're going to be talking about its medical attributes. We're going to be talking about why it was made illegal and what we need to do to bypass all of these simple state laws that may take forever to fire up all around the country and take care of this ourselves as we the people. And it is within our power to change this literally overnight once we coordinate. These are all things that are coming up and rather soon. I appreciate you listening in. I appreciate you allowing me to vent my frustrations on these rants each week. Believe it or not, they help me. And I hope they help you. As usual, this show will be embedded in the parent article where a lot of the information came from. The links will be there with the show, and you will be able to read all of this yourself and follow a lot of the links that come with it. You're all appreciated. I wish you all a very pleasant evening. I am Roger Landry, the founder and managing director of the Liberty Beacon Project. This is TLBTV, Eradicating Programmed Ignorance, the Town Crier. Have a great night.